Welcome to the second video in a short course on sustainability and sustainability leadership. This is the solution. Last time we covered the problem. Where we left off last, amid despair and compromise of all those thoughts that I had, I did something that against all expectations led to all those results. Lowering my ecological footprint over 90% in 2 years and still going strong, more since then, and enjoying it. Media coverage, lots of media coverage, acceptance and embracing and being embraced from all sides of the political spectrum, left, right, center, up, down. Not authoritarian though. Different religions, different places, old, young, rich, poor, all sorts of different, because it revealed a credible and doable path to a brighter future. That's the solution we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to talk about the context of how I came about what I came about. So these experiments. I experimented a lot with eating. So I cut meat from my diet in 1990. Then sometime after that, I stopped having corn syrup. Sometime after that, I cut out hydrogenated oils. Then at some point, not too long, maybe 10 years ago, I cut out all animal products. And then I was trying to figure out what I didn't like processed food. So I decided foods without fiber removed. That was my deciding line between if things were over-processed. Now, those were changes that benefited me. They were for my health. This time I acted to help others at my expense. Or so I thought at the time. I did an experiment, I'm going to describe in a second, that I thought would be helping others, but not myself. I thought I was taking one for the team. And my book details the experiments, also the results of those experiments and the ramifications, what they led to, how our culture got this way, why we feel helpless to change how we are, and then how to change how we are. But the highlights for this experiment was, for the first time, this is a little over 10 years ago, I saw how much garbage I produced. I would empty my garbage about once a week. And it was mostly plastic food packaging. And I didn't feel good about that because, even if I couldn't change nothing, if I could change nothing else in the world, my garbage would hurt people. I know that it takes centuries for plastic to break down, maybe more. And only I could take responsibility for it. Maybe I can't fix everything. Maybe other people are causing bigger problems, but I'm causing this problem. And so I thought, could I go for a week without buying packaged food? So I resolved to take personal responsibility. And that led to a 1-week experiment. Could I go for a week without packaged food? And I was very pleased to find, I actually made it 2.5 weeks. The cure wasn't worse than the disease. I was pleased to find, unexpectedly, I found an intrinsic reward. I liked, it took me a little time to practice. I knew how to cook, but not from scratch. So I had to learn to cook from scratch. And the intrinsic reward that I felt contradicted every sustainability message I'd heard, which I talked about in the last video. That, you have to sacrifice, you have to make things worse. The leader in me saw there's potential to lead. Intrinsic motivation is different than extrinsic. It's not telling people what to do. And the entrepreneur in me thought, well, if I can help people live a better life, that's an unmet demand. And that demand seems really big. I think a lot of people want to live more sustainably. I bet something like 8 billion people want to live more sustainably. They certainly want cleaner air, land, and water. So that led to 2 paths, because one was, is it just me? Maybe I just happen to like cooking and fresh fruits. Well, I didn't like fresh fruits and vegetables before, but I came to. Maybe that's just me. Maybe it's just food. Maybe other areas I wouldn't want to be more sustainable, like flying, for example. So I had to keep experimenting in my personal life, find out other things, if it wasn't just food or other things, and also with my friends and people around me. Would they also like this experience too? So I had to experiment. And then I had to experiment with leading others. I had to develop a leadership technique. Well, I had to find out if it could be done or not. And that led me to start my podcast. And if you listen to my podcast over the course of it, you can hear me developing my leadership technique to lead people to share what matters to them and act on what matters to them, which is very different. That's intrinsic motivation, rather than telling them, Bangladesh is going to be underwater and therefore you have to do this, as opposed to what matters to you in the environment do you want to act on that? And that led me to develop what's now called the Spodek method, which is that conversational technique. I'll talk more about it, and led to the workshop in the book, which is how I implement these things. And then people started really liking it. You saw some of the testimonials and what people said about it before, and that led to a strategy of, if people like what they're getting, not lecturing them, not forcing them to do stuff, not convincing or cajoling or coercing or manipulating, but if they like it. And that's what I found. You're probably thinking, oh yeah, really? I hope you are, because it's really different than you expect. And that led to a strategy of top down, bottom up, everywhere, all at once, starting here now with you and me. which was to work with people. Well, I'll talk about it more. And if the cure ever felt worse than the disease for me or the alumni of the workshop, I'd stop. But it keeps being better, not just by my standards, but by their standards. Remember last time I talked about feeling lost in the woods or feeling lost in Paris? Well, these were the maps, where every turn you take gets you more and more lost. Well, what do you do? I started thinking, what do I do if I'm lost, if I'm actually lost in Paris? And I keep turning and turning and everything gets me more and more lost, all these red X's. What I do is I go back to the path that I was on that wasn't lost, where I knew where I was going to go. I thought I was going to get a shortcut. I thought, if I go this way, maybe it'll work out better for me. But it didn't. What do? I go back to where I was when I was on track, and I go back on the route that worked, and that works. And this changed once I felt that intrinsic reward, and I realized that I liked living more sustainably. I realized we could go back as a culture, as me as an individual, but lots of people in general, and as a culture, instead of feeling like I was getting beat up and destroyed and shot, and not shot, but punished. I realized no, I could go back onto the track. I could lead us. I felt that I could lead culture back to when we were on track before, and get back on track, and stop chasing all these wild goose. Stop going in directions that don't work. It isn't moving backward to return to a path that works. It's not moving backward. It works. So I realized I wasn't getting wounded. Our culture had taken a wrong turn and just kept getting more and more lost. And the solution was to restore these lost values that we'd left in chasing, fossil fuel stuff and stuff that pollutes and depletes, not realizing that it would hurt people. We go back to living more stewardship, living by values that we lost. And, I learned beware spending too much time in a seedy part of town, lest you become seedy yourself. I realized that I'd been doing things that were hurting people. Hands-on practical experience revealed a path that worked. It's the opposite of returning to the Stone Age. I'm not saying go back to the Stone Age. I'm saying back to values that have been a part of our culture, but that we've lost. And I'll get back to that. Humanity's done plenty that doesn't require polluting or depleting. Democracy, the Magna Carta, abolitionism, universal education and universal suffrage, the arts, sports, vaccines, antibiotics, anesthesia. These are all things that don't require polluting. We don't have to give these things up at all. We can retain the 13th Amendment, knowledge of carcinogens, ability to warm the globe. We can know that we could do that. We don't want to do that. We know that we can deplete rivers and aquifers. We don't have to keep doing that. So this word enlightened indigenous, it's enlightenment and indigenous. It's where these things overlap. And I'll talk about that more in a bit, but I like this word enlightened indigenous. So on the individual level, if I can lead you to improve your life by your own standards and save time and money in the process and live more sustainably, I can provide a service. If it creates joy and returns gratitude and can be taught so that each person that I teach it to will want to share it with many others, that means that's a recipe for exponential growth. That could solve our problems. The result is the potential for entrepreneurship. And that's without pollution and depletion destroying the original intent of protecting life, liberty, and property of what American, what our Constitution says that our government is supposed to guarantee. I can make the world better. I can live by the original intent of the founders and help you do so. That seems like a good business. So remember all these problems: addiction, obesity, longevity going down, anxiety up, medication up, suicide up, polarization, heart disease, diabetes, depression, sperm counts, birth defects. Remember all of these things? Well, I call them problems, but they're really symptoms. Remember, they result from our behavior. Not all of them, but a lot of the change in them has. Well, unsustainability is upstream of all of them. Living unsustainably causes all these things. Living unsustainably leads to imperialism. And my book goes into this. I'm just kind of glossing the surface here. But if your culture lives unsustainably, that means you're running out of something. You have three choices. You can either switch back to sustainable, you can collapse, or you can find some other place that has extra and take it from them, and that's imperialism. And that led to colonialism, which led to slavery and racism. I'll talk about later how that the mechanisms there, but my book goes into a lot more detail. And led to environmental degradation. And if we could magically fix any or all of them, any of imperialism, colonialism, any of these, or any of these up here, if we could fix all of them, but we kept living unsustainably, we would recreate all of those things. So working on sustainability works on all of them. Advances in sustainability advances all of them. Only by achieving sustainability can we stop causing imperialism, colonialism, slavery, and racism. It's not hard to live sustainably, I found. It's hard to live sustainably in a culture that promotes the opposite, however much lip service is paid to sustainability. Now that's not, living sustainably isn't hard. It's the friction with other people, but that can change. Cultures have changed in the past. That's a social and emotional issue, therefore requiring leadership, not science, technology, law, things like that. So to put it bluntly or plainly, simply, if you do something that kills innocent people and you don't want to kill innocent people, you have to stop doing that thing. That's pretty simple. That's what the Spodek method teaches. We consider leadership a performance art and teach it that way. As with any performance art, how you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. And in particular, you practice the basics. So that's what we teach in the workshop. And our basics are a leadership tool we call the Spodek method. So this is like the equivalent if you want to learn piano, you play scales. If you want to play tennis, you hit ground strokes. If you want to learn sustainability leadership, you practice a Spodek method and more. It's a conversational method that unearths universal, intrinsic emotions toward nature, health, safety, security, stewardship, community, and family, and empowers people who do the workshop to act on these things. So it brings these things to your life. And it's experiential. So you learn by doing. That's how we learn things that are experiential, that you practice. You don't learn to play piano by reading books. You don't play tennis. You don't learn to play tennis by reading books. So like listening to Beethoven, words can only point to it, but I'll try. I can describe what happens when you practice playing scales. When you practice scales, it leads to playing music. And the more you play music, you learn to express and learn about yourself. It's not just playing notes on a page. You learn to express yourself. Hearing others playing music in new ways and so on. But only experiencing it is experiencing it. So our culture today, the mainstream, this is what we learn through experience, how we change this view. Our culture today, I think the mainstream view is that people think in this Venn diagram, there are activities we like and there are activities that help the environment, and they do not overlap. And the core of the Spodek method is a mindset shift. It's to lead to things that we like and things that help the environment overlap, which means that they're things that are joyful and sustainable, things that we like to do that help the environment. The Spodek method teaches to evoke values instead of imposing them, to listen instead of lecture, to support instead of judge, to empathize instead of blame, to act with compassion instead of tell people what to do, and inspire instead of manipulate. In my experience, up until I started acting and finding my own intrinsic motivation, developing the Spodek method, I felt people trying to get me to live more sustainably were imposing their values on me. They were lecturing me. They were judging me. They were blaming me. They were telling me what to do. They were manipulating me. I much prefer when people evoke my values. They listen to me. They support me. They empathize with me. They act with compassion, and they inspire me. And that's what the Spodek method teaches people do. That's why people like it so much. And it transforms apathy to enthusiasm, anxiety to confidence, inaction to effective action, resistance to gratitude, ignorance to desire to learn, ideas dying to ideas spreading. Before the Spodek method, sustainability, I felt apathetic about it. I felt anxious about acting. So I didn't act. I resisted acting. And I felt, I don't know what to do. I don't know what the problems are. And ideas that I had would just go away. And instead now, I and the people who do the workshop, they act with enthusiasm, with confidence. We act effectively, with gratitude toward the people who taught it to us. And we want to learn more. And the ideas spread. So the Spodek method uses the opposite of manipulation or convincing, cajoling, or coercing. And that's why it doesn't appeal to authoritarians who rely on those techniques. So there's some environmentalists down in this area, the authoritarian zone. And they sometimes don't like this because it's fun. People like it. It's rewarding. It's joyful. So its diverse appeal, because it's driven by intrinsic motivation and effective action, it appeals to left, right, and center, to old and young, to rich and poor, from engaged environmentalists to disengaged lay people. It gets disengaged to engage. And people who are into advocates of limited government, they like it because it's not asking for government intervention. Progressives like it because it gets people to act. It's grassroots. It's bottom up. Free market advocates like it because it's not telling people what to do. Advocates of regulation like it because it achieves what regulations are supposed to achieve. Anti-racists like it. Anti-woke like it. Anti-racists like it because it helps stop causing racism. My book goes into a lot more, so I'm just kind of glossing the surface here. And to woke like it because a lot of people on the right, when they hear sustainability, they hear woke, trying to take over government, things like that. It's not that. And so far, every nationality that's been on the podcast, they like it. It works. It takes a workshop. They like it. And we've had such big time zone issues because we do it on Zoom, but we make it work. Now, when I was a kid growing up, when I had to play violin, I had to take violin lessons, and I would cry, and my mom would say, "More scales." And sports, I really didn't like when I was a kid growing up. But actually later I loved sports. And you might say, all right, if you're teaching this performance art of sustainability leadership, well, some people like some things and some people don't. Maybe, it's not effective to force someone to keep doing something that they don't like. But doing the Spodek method, and I'm now over 800 episodes, so I've had a lot of guests that I've done this with, and I've done it with in the workshops and with students. It turns out one of my big discoveries, we all feel powerful emotions around nature, so we can love acting on it. But each connection is unique. That's why we have to listen. The goal of the Spodek method is not for you to copy me, but for you to do in your life what works for you. That's why people like it so much, because they get to act on their values. The Spodek method works more on the slope than the y-intercept. It leads you to want to do more than to do something really big, but a one-time thing. So that's why it leads to continual improvement. People do the workshop and they keep doing it more and more and more, especially the ones that really engage with the alumni community. So here's some examples, some leaders on the Spodek method. So Tony Hansen he's just retired from being a director at McKinsey. So if you don't know McKinsey, you can look it up. They're like a big consultancy firm. They work with they're really big. And he said, I'm just going to go for the stuff in bold. Very few have done, actually, the method, it opened some doors. He did things more because of the Spodek method than he was doing before without the Spodek method. I said, very few have done what you've done, which is to create a leadership technique that works. Those who don't do it, they don't recognize what it takes. They don't recognize the benefits of leadership. So, the Spodek method is one of those tools that enable that awakening. So I'll let you read more. You can pause and read more. Stephen M.R. Covey, best-selling author, he talked a lot about the quote from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I don't know if you know this quote. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. And he said that's what the Spodek method did for him. It was an emotional experience. It felt great. It felt aligned and appropriate to what I was doing. That's what inspired me. He said it made him think about that quote. He said, Josh, you're inspiring people, not just motivating them. This is touching to hear. And you can, by the way, you can go to my podcast and listen to these episodes. So Sandra Perez, I hope I'm pronouncing that right because I'm not from Puerto Rico and she is, but she lives in the Bronx. And she said of her Spodek method experience, well, I'll just jump to the end. It's about incremental change and doing that consistently, not just a one-time thing. And when you like doing it, you keep doing it. And Jackie from Australia. So she was a student and she was like, I'm so busy. I don't have time oh man, listen to her episodes. Because at the beginning she says, I don't have time for this. I'm already doing all this stuff. And at the end she said, I have more and more time. This is what I have time for. This is what I make time for. And it actually calmed her life down. She said, like dropping a pebble in a very still pond, all of a sudden, all these ripple effects happen and it just ripples further and further out more than what you think it would. So she's finding that it helps her lead others. That was her goal. So let's talk about the workshop in the alumni community. I talked about the Spodek method gives you that mindset shift. Well, the workshop is you take the mindset shift and it's a process of continual improvement. So that we actually find that the more we act on it, the more we find more and more overlap between things we like and things that help the environment. So there's more things that are joyful and sustainable. And then after the workshop, when you stick with the alumni community and you keep going, we find that living sustainably in general brings joy. And this is where I live right now. Things that I like and things that help the environment overlap almost completely. There's a lot of joyful and sustainable things, and polluting and depleting come to feel repugnant. So willpower and coercion are not necessary. Somehow the words aren't showing up there. So willpower and coercion aren't necessary. In fact, they're counterproductive. So again, the process. The Spodek method is that mindset shift. There are activities we like that help the environment. The workshop leads to a process of continual improvement, and the alumni community leads to where we feel like we're swimming downstream. And this is not a one-time experience. Practicing the basics enables you to play what you want. So if you take piano lessons, you can, from the beginning, you can go into jazz, pop, classical, avant-garde, lots of different directions. Likewise or in sports. If you learn the real basics, you can go in lots of directions. Basketball, soccer, track and field, things like that. What I mean is that the workshop is like basics for all sports, but in sustainability leadership. So if you learn cardio, if you develop your cardiovascular endurance and things, if you learn teamwork, if you learn fair play, if you learn how to improve, how to win or lose gracefully so that people keep wanting to play with you, that's what we get. That stuff is in sports, but the Spodek method is that in sustainability and leadership. So you learn the basics you can go in lots of different directions with it. So what the workshop does is it unleashes deep, powerful, intrinsic motivations that we all already have for nature. It resolves inner conflict instead of inflaming it. So instead of feeling like, oh, I'm hurting people and I want to suppress and deny, we don't think those words, but we do that. And it creates tools for people to grow the movement on their own so that you can share it with others. And you'll bring joy to them and they'll express gratitude to you. The process in the workshop, again, I'm just describing it. You have to do it. Like, I can't tell you what it's like for playing scales to switch to expressing yourself through the music, but that's what happens if you practice enough. And in sustainability leadership, it's like hitting ground strokes or playing scales, but it's doing it with others in the workshop, so you learn together. The workshop can transform people in 7 weeks, what took me 7 years. And it's wonderful to see this happen. And we designed the workshop and the alumni community to be a breath of fresh air because we know how hard it can be when you're living by your values and other people have compromised theirs and they try to get you to compromise yours and they try to make it's so easy to just go along to get along. But here's a place where you can feel like you're swimming downstream. And the resources that come along with the workshop, just to give you a picture of it, there's the how-to workbook, there's a community site with videos, forums, and more so that people can interact with each other and you can see how people in the past have done it. There's people, oh man, the classmates, how when people work with each other, teams form, and it really is wonderful to see. Then there's the alumni community because people want to get back. People who end dependencies of sorts, they like to help other people end their dependencies. The instructors, we're dedicated and we want to work with you. Then there's office hours outside of class. There's a podcast, it's a resource you can hear other people doing, or me doing the Spodek method. So there's lots of stuff out there. It's like a really full-fledged course. Now you might be wondering, how do you reconcile this Venn diagram? Wait, activities you like and activities that help the environment, how has that become all that overlap? Because activities you like tend to be like, I like modern medicine. People like traveling the globe. People like washing machines instead of washing clothes by hand. But things that help the environment are things like avoiding straws, avoiding meat, avoiding takeout. So over here on the right, what's joyful and sustainable is not that we make traveling the globe somehow not pollute. What happens is it's the values that these things bring us. We get that. So what's joyful and sustainable in this area of overlap here is health, safety, security, family, community, freedom, liberty, our deepest values. Do unto others, live and let live. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Live and let live. Leave it better than you found it. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's what's in there. And I'll keep talking about that more to make it, when you do it, you feel, oh, I get it, how these things overlap. It's the value of those things. That's what I want. We've all changed this way in the past. So an example for me, in my life, I used to like going out partying. I'd go to clubs and have a great time. I'd be partying and all my friends and often behind the DJ booth. So that was really fun. Every now and then I'd be having a really great time and someone would say, hey Josh, I'm just heading out. Good to see you. I'll see you next time. I'm like, why are you leaving so early? It's an amazing party. How come you're not staying? And they would say, well, I got to go walk the dog. So they had to go home and walk the dog. Now, it seemed to me, I grew up with dogs, but it seemed to me a party is much foreign. I mean, when you go and walk the dog, I personally prefer partying to literally picking up poop. And yet that's what they're going to do. They're going to literally pick up poop. But that's not in their hearts and minds what they were doing. What they were doing in their hearts and mind were they're going to unconditional love. And that made the party and the poop fade away in the background. They were giving love to their dog, and their dog was loving them back. And that was worth more than those other two things. Now, I'm going to let you in on a secret. When I was making this slide, the original layout was different. I was going to do it party, poop, And then over on the right was the dog. But when I put them on top of each other, I inadvertently realized that's the image. That's the Venn diagram. Over here on the left is, I like to party. I can be responsible. And there's overlap of spending time with the dog. And that's like this Venn diagram. And so I started putting this diagram where this one was in the presentation. So for the rest of this course, you'll see this image popping up, and it represents, there's things that we like, and sometimes we have to be responsible, and then living more sustainably is in the middle, is both of these. So another example of this is when I grew up, I loved Snyder's of Hanover pretzel bits with the flavor. Doritos I loved, Ben & Jerry's I loved. And I like to be fit, so I didn't mind. I ran marathons, rowing, played sports. I would do stuff to work off the calories, to stay in shape. Living more sustainably led to eating healthier. I learned to love fresh fruits and vegetables more than I ever loved the pretzels. And now I can't stand those things. I don't know if there's enough money in the world to get me to eat a Dorito. And so I don't know if you can tell here, you'll see this picture later on, but this is me cooking without packaging. And it's actually at a workshop for others. So this was the Venn diagram of something that is both of those things. They gave me all the value of the other things, but it's sustainable. Likewise, I used to travel the world. I loved going to all these different places. And I didn't mind working to pay to do it, to make the money to pay for the plane tickets. What do I do now instead? I volunteer in my neighborhood, and I meet people that I never would have met. I mean, some who live in shelters, some who are homeless. There's lots of people, and the other volunteers. And so this is the community fridge that I deliver food to. This was maybe a delivery that I made. I volunteer as an auxiliary police officer. I never did anything like that before. And the sense of fulfilling duty and honor is really amazing. I could go on about that. I travel bike camping. So there's my bike. On the back is all the tent and stuff I needed to, camp out. And then here's this workshop that I helped lead others to learn how to cook sustainably. So there's that pressure cooker and the battery in a park. And I'll talk more about that later. So that's living joyfully and sustainably. Now, I prefer it to the old ways. I don't miss working hard just to get away from it when stuff near me is stuff I don't have to get away from. And speaking about flying, here's some people who haven't flown. Marco Polo is like, to me, the quintessential traveler. Abraham Lincoln. Turns out he actually never, except for one trip across Niagara Falls, he didn't even leave the United States. And the United States was a lot smaller back then. Seems like a pretty worldly guy, pretty successful in making the world a better place. Aristotle never flew. Jesus, Paul, Buddha, Lao Tzu, Muhammad, Mozart, Shakespeare. These are people who never flew. I'd say Shakespeare is pretty cultural. We've all changed this way. Raising kids, another example. It rarely makes sense from a dollars and cents perspective. If you look at it like this, raising kids, if you look at on the balance sheet, it doesn't make sense. So a lot of people treat sustainability like choosing to raise kids based on profits and losses, and neglecting the meaning and thrills of experiencing them saying their first words, taking their first steps, their graduation, they're walking down the aisle, then in old age for them taking care of you back. Those things don't add up they don't show up on the balance sheet, but that's what's joyful and sustainable. You want to have kids and you want to be able to afford things. Well, you spend time with the kids. It's really wonderful. So most people live in this mainstream view that there are activities we like and activities that help the environment, and they don't overlap. And if you believe that there's no overlap and you want to help the environment, you have to try to get people to do things that they don't want to. That path requires convincing, cajoling, coercing, manipulation, which I can't stand, and they don't work. It leads to authoritarianism, which leads people to resist and oppose. And I see a lot of that in sustainability right now. But I don't see much sustainability leadership. It's sustainability management and coercion, things like that. After the workshop, if you understand the overlap, as we who have done the workshop know from hands-on practical experience, then that path leads to leadership. It leads to entrepreneurship and marketing and sales. And then you can lead, even inspire. Have you felt inspired to live more sustainably? Through intrinsic motivation, it happens. It creates meaning and purpose. And then you bring people joy, and they return you gratitude, and you want to share it with more, and you want to teach them so that they can bring it to others and they can get that gratitude back. There's lots of sustainability efforts out there that lack hands-on practical experience. It's like people who read books on music appreciation and they read books on music theory, but they never put their fingers on the keyboard. And they're trying to teach piano. So people who've never tried to live sustainably, trying to teach people to live sustainably. It doesn't work. Would you take a yoga class from someone who never practiced yoga? Or who said, yoga is going to make your life worse, but I'm still going to teach it to you? It's going to make your culture worse, but I'm still going to teach it to you? I don't think that's going to be an effective teaching experience. After the workshop, through hands-on practical experience, that creates credibility and integrity, which are essential to lead. Try to lead without credibility or integrity. It doesn't work. I know of no other method of sustainability that's designed to spread and accelerate on its own. It's not just the effects that you have in the moment. It's the ongoing effects. The workshop creates joy and returns gratitude, so it spreads. People want to share it. If you bring me joy to where I thank you, and you teach me to do it with others too, I can expect to bring them joy, the people that I teach, so that they will thank me, and I can teach them to repeat the process. If each person shares with more than one, that's exponential. That's the recipe for exponential growth and mutually supportive community, because we like that we're doing it together. And it's based on everyone improving his or her own life, not you have to do this or else. And from there, from one person working with one other person to global cultural change, that's like water flowing downhill. It just happens. No convincing, cajoling, or coercing, or manipulation necessary. So this is what one person said who took the workshop. Changing my own behavior is joyful and empowering. Through Joshua's course, I can continue as I am, or I can take the reins and have a chance to be part of the solution. I'll let you pause and read all the text. But it's a source of support, inspiration, information, and skills. And I feel great and motivated to figure out what's next. You'll be surprised and delighted with the empowerment you feel to take action. This is Beth wrote this to other people, and then later I found out about it. And I asked her if I could share this. Part of the workshop is writing reflections. So people post their reflections, and you can see how other people experienced it, and they can see how you did, and you share about this. So one person wrote, and this was not written to be shared up here, but they wrote, this week I managed to have conversations. It was way more than I expected. And I'll let you read it, but I wasn't expecting such an impactful response to the very first question. It was really powerful conversation for both of us. This was a really great experience. I'm so glad that I got to have these conversations, and I'm so excited to have even more. So this podcast, this workshop, this led to the results that I talked about before of appeal, because it's intrinsic to, I think it's in our DNA to like nature. So left, right, authoritarian, not authoritarian, but center and libertarian. The people in business and sports, in Pulitzer Prize winners, Nobel Prize winners, they like this stuff of all these religions, of all places in the world. And the media, I think, am I someone special? I think there's so much demand. I think people want to know that something can work out there. I think the coverage that I've gotten, all this coverage in all across the world of stuff about me and by me, I think that's because people want to know about this, that there's something that works. Our audience is people who want to enjoy living sustainably, and there are billions. So let me talk about some role models and some real life examples. People have been on the podcast, and so Bea Johnson, she was a podcast guest, and she wrote a book called Zero Waste Home. And her family, I encourage you to listen to her on my podcast and read the book, because her family of 4, including 2 boys, collectively produce less trash than I do. And I haven't filled a load of garbage since 2019. And 4 of them produce less than I do. Her husband, who's a financier, transformed from skeptical to enthusiastic. It brought them closer. And her boys, they matured faster. They learned values faster. So this was, she wants to raise a family. She wants to be responsible. She wants to have fun with them. Well, Zero Waste helped more of that by bringing them closer together. That's that Venn diagram, real life. Joshua Becker, another podcast guest. He wrote books on minimalism, The Minimalist Home, Clutter-Free with Kids, and Simplify, and other books as well. He was on the podcast, and he talked about his epiphany cleaning his garage. This was a major life event for him. One day he was going to clean his garage, and he was going to play with his son. And he said to his son, all right, let me just finish. I'm going to clean the garage and then we're going to play. So he goes and cleans and cleans and cleans, and he's cleaning and he's spending all day cleaning. And his son is like, "What, Daddy, I thought you were going to play with me." And he keeps saying, "I'll get there, son. I just have a couple more things to clean up." And I think his garage didn't even fit his cars. And at some point, his neighbor comes over and says, "Maybe you don't need to own all that stuff." And it was a big revelation for him, because his stuff that he bought for his family was getting in between him and his family. All that stuff that was supposed to be activities he liked, but it wasn't working. And a lot of people think minimalism or sustainability is like it's a luxury, but no, less is not a luxury. Spending time and money often takes us away from our loved ones. All of his stuff that he bought intending to be for family was taken away from them. So he wants to spend time with family and he wants to provide, but actually spending time with family is the overlap. Sustainability brings you closer to family. Another podcast guest, Chuck Marohn, he works, look up Strong Towns, and they help cities and municipalities become more fiscally responsible. So when he started off decades ago, I think by now, he worked in an engineering company. His job was to run the numbers when a city wanted to widen a road or put in a new plumbing bunch of pipes. He would do the numbers, and it was his job to show that it would make money. But the more he did it, if he looked out farther than just a couple of years, he found that the maintenance costs always overwhelmed and it wasn't making money. He would get paid to show that something would make money that in the long run wouldn't. So he was profiting from a culture of fiscal irresponsibility. And there's a big gut check for him. He could either keep doing what he was doing, he would compromise his values. His goal was to help cities. So he could compromise to get along, or he could risk his lifestyle to act by his values, to say, this isn't really working. That was a difficult decision for him. And what made it work was his wife's support. You can hear this on the podcast. I asked him, because it was a choice I have to make myself. Do I want to live by my values when it's hard, or just do the easy thing, make money and not care about the future? And he says his wife made it possible. It brought them closer together. So he wants to provide for his wife and have a fun marriage, but he also wants to do what he thinks is right. And it turns out together it works. And there's lots of people who've done the who've done the workshop and have done the Spodek method. They find that it brings them closer to people who are the people that they want to be closest with. Even though before they do it, they might say, "Oh, my wife, my husband," they never go for it. Lorna Davis, another podcast guest, a big-time CEO, big TEDx talker. And if you listen to her 4 podcast episodes, if I start talking about her, I talk way too much. But you can hear 2 pairs there's before and after she learned doing the Spodek method with her. And you see that she starts practicing these things on a small scale, just seeing that there's overlap, things that help the environment that she enjoys. But then after some time, she does the workshop, and you can hear before and after the workshop how before she's like, "I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to get into it so much as you." And afterwards, she starts doing things on her own that I never suggested. And had I suggested, she probably wouldn't do just if it was to comply, but she likes the results. So the external results, what effects are we having on the world? People who do the workshop. We are restoring a culture of stewardship and doing our best joyfully. Doing our best, not compromising, not giving up. And restoring lost values. Do unto others. Leave it better than you found it. Live and let live. Love your neighbor as yourself. We're restoring these values to our communities. To clarify, we are not promising peace on earth or an eternal life of bliss. This is not the answer to everything. Conflict will always remain after we reach sustainability. We also can't undo the past. That there's pollution and depletion that for centuries, millennia, will keep harming people. We can't undo that's out there. But we will stop hurting innocent people just to live. We will stop drowning in internal conflict of feeling like I'm hurting people and, well, what can I do? I can't stop. All that stuff from the first video. And we'll stop living in a culture of compromise. Instead, we'll do our best. Are we going to fix everything overnight? I don't think that's possible, but we'll do our best to live more sustainably, to help others live more sustainably, to live by our values, to help alleviating suffering, to make for our children a world as healthy, safe, and secure as we can. So alumni, people who've done the workshop, many of them will act with resolve and purpose to live more sustainably, and that's it. They'll just live more sustainably, and that's great. Others will create support groups and community. They'll do more. Others will join the team and they'll help us deliver the workshops to more and more people. And some will see the huge entrepreneurial opportunity in the unmet needs of 8 billion. And hopefully they'll do what I'm doing and then take it on whole other levels. I'll talk about that more in a future video. Some will act beyond what I can imagine. So there will be, as I said, there are going to be more results at the level of global cultural change in the next videos, especially in the business entrepreneurial opportunities and the political opportunities and the celebrity opportunities. So those videos are going to talk a lot more about how the workshop is just the start. How about the internal results? The results to you as an individual. What the workshop delivers to participants most, more than anything else, is it living more sustainably? It's liberation and freedom. It's health, safety, and security. It's community and family. It's the ability to teach others to do it too. That's what people talk about. The side effect is living more sustainably, and including teaching others all of this stuff so that they can do it too. So you can feel it spread. So we can enjoy the freedom and value of living by our deepest values and helping others do the same for themselves and their lives. Yes, for now it requires struggle because we have a culture that promotes unsustainability. But it was a struggle that life always required. Life was never just manna from heaven all over the place all the time. Only now we're restoring our lost values. Do unto others, leave and let live. Leave it better than you found it. Live and let live. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's, when you think about it, doing our best is the best we can live anyway. If we weren't living in this situation, we'd still be trying to live by our values, living by our best. That's what, this doing the workshop calms things down a lot because you're doing your best. It's just, in this day and age, it's helping other people live more sustainably. And I prefer the struggle of doing my best, which I always had to do anyway, to just giving up. So alumni want to learn about problems. Things that it used to be when I felt like, what can I do? And someone said, well, there's flooding over there. I'd say, I can't do anything about it. Making me feel bad doesn't help. But now that we know that we can make a difference, instead of thinking, why learn about it if I can't do anything about it? It's, I want to know since I know I can make a difference and affect a difference. So formerly taboo topics become normal to discuss after the workshop. So I'm only going to touch on it here. But this book, Countdown by Alan Weisman, this was my first time when I realized to talk about population. In an earlier video, I talked about how a lot of people can't talk about population. They lose their cool because they think, it has to be eugenics. It has to be forced sterilizations. And this book was about not that. And I had on the podcast someone he wrote about, his name escapes me for a second, Machai Viravaidya in Thailand. He was Western educated and realized that growing the population wasn't helping Thailand. And a one man started changing the birth rate from very high to replacement level in a way that was non-coercive and people liked it, and it brought prosperity and health and security to everyone. Then there's Jane O'Sullivan was a podcast guest, and this is just one example of a paper that she wrote where she found that a lot of population growth is now, it's losing money because the infrastructure that we have to build, and it's when you actually do the numbers, it doesn't work out the way people think it does. Hawaii is a big example for me that even people who are the most pro-growth, take Julian Simon, who says we can grow for billions of years. He still doesn't say we can grow infinitely fast. There's still adjustment periods. So you can't just stick 8 billion people on Hawaii and think it's going to work out. Now, I learned that Hawaii, the Polynesians discovered it, and then they traded it with the Hawaiians, and the Polynesians traded for a while, and something happened. We don't know what, but the Hawaiians were on their own. The trade stopped. So people lived on Hawaii for something like 500 to 1,000 years. We don't know exactly how long, but it was long enough that if Malthusian collapse were inevitable, it would have happened, but it didn't. And that means that people living on Hawaii had found some equilibrium between them and the environment that worked for them. Now that meant that if they kept, it's somewhere around 300,000, I think. I'm not an anthropologist, so I don't know the exact numbers, but they had some sort of stable population. And that meant that if someone lived longer, some couple somewhere had to wait a little longer to have a kid. And if someone died younger, some other couple could have a kid earlier. Now, why am I talking about this? Because that's normal. For most of human history, people talked about stuff like that because they recognized that we had to be in some sort of balance. And now, for some reason, people can't talk about it. But after the workshop, that's one of the things that people can talk about calmly. Do I know all the answers? No, but I can talk about it calmly. So when I was stressed from being lost, from not knowing any answers, I couldn't see a path that worked. But learning about other cultures, not just other cultures that are in our mainstream culture, because the culture that I live in has pretty much taken over the world. But there are places where it hasn't. So learning about the San Bushmen in the Kalahari Desert. James Sussman, who wrote this book, was a guest. He lived among them. And I had people who lived with the Kogi, with the Tsimane, with the other cultures, the Hadza, and others. And I participated in events nearby me that were led by indigenous peoples who lived around Manhattan a long time ago. And then Tribe by Sebastian Junger, also anthropologist by training. I learned about how other cultures, I learned others' ways of living. So we also offer courses in leadership and entrepreneurship, and with more to come in sales, science, community building, and more. This is stuff to add on when you really enjoy sustainability and you realize it's intrinsic to all of us. You want to share it. So here's an actual reflection from someone who did the leadership class. He wrote, it was really fun and engaging exercise. It takes work. You got to do these things. It's learn by doing. But it's an absolute joy to do it with your friends, family, coworkers, or anyone else. That's learning leadership, not coercion or exercising authority. The wonderful thing about this exercise is that it creates connections with people. That's what, after you do sustainability leadership, you do straight leadership. He was connecting with people in a new way. He really enjoyed the results of this workshop. And that's what happens in this community. It's the opposite of what a lot of people associate with sustainability. So the strategy and vision, the long-term vision of what we're doing is everyone on earth living joyfully sustainably, including governments and corporations. That means more health, safety, security, freedom, liberty, community, family, entrepreneurship, innovation, and our deepest values. More of these things from living joyfully sustainably. The mission is to change American and global culture to expect sustainability will bring joy, not burden or obligation. Because if you think it's burden or obligation, you got to be authoritarian. But if you expect it to bring joy and you have techniques, then you're sharing joy. And the strategy to do it is enabled by the Spodek method, which is a tactic. It's the only tactic I know of that's designed to spread by acting on intrinsic motivation, therefore meaningful and joyful, enabling exponential growth. So the strategy, top down, bottom up. So the top down part is working with very well-known people. So we have role models. The bottom up part is working with the person on the street who does a workshop and can spread it with others. So that's the bottom up grassroots part. Everywhere, all at once, starting here now with you and me. Because why wait if it's enjoyable? This vision is possible because each step to it is based on intrinsic motivation and reward. That's leadership. Not exercising authority or cajoling or conversing or manipulating. And all it takes is doing it, which is covered in, the videos, the business entrepreneurial opportunities, the political opportunities, and the celebrity opportunities. So the next videos coming up soon. The workshop inspiration. So the teaching and practice of the performance art of sustainability leadership. I didn't come up with teaching experientially on my own. So here are some of the role models or some of the inspirations for the workshop. Charlie Parker, quite an accomplished musician. This is what he said. You've got to learn your instrument. So you got to learn the physical instrument. Then you practice, practice, practice. And then when you finally get up there on the bandstand, forget all that and just wail. And that's what happens when people do this workshop is first you practice, practice, practice. And then eventually you don't copy me. You do your thing. He also said, this is Charlie Parker again, music is your experience, your thoughts, your wisdom. If you don't live it, it won't come out of your horn. If you don't live sustainably, you can't lead others to live sustainably. And so this workshop leads you to live sustainably. Martha Graham, the great dancer, often called the Picasso of dance. She said, the dancer is realistic. His craft teaches him to be. Either the foot is pointed or it is not. That means the details matter. So, when you learn sustainability leadership, it's not just hope for the best. Either the foot is pointed or is not. No amount of dreaming will point it for you. This requires discipline, not drill, not something imposed from without, but discipline imposed by you yourself upon yourself to do the exercises, to do the workshop. So when you do the workshop, you're going to have to do them. You got to do the reps. But your goal is freedom. Freedom may only be achieved through discipline. In the studio, you learn to conform, to submit yourself to the demands of your craft, so that you may finally be free. So that's why what comes out of this is freedom. So when you do the workshop, you're going to be working. You got to do the reps, but it leads to freedom. At first, it doesn't feel that way. You feel like you're going to do it and you're going to be like, oh, why do I have to do so many reps? And then at some point it clicks and you feel, oh, that's why. Here's a visual representation. Here's a painting from 1858. You might not recognize the painter because at this stage, this painter is young and hasn't yet developed his style. So a little under 10 years later, you might recognize this. It's Monet. So he went from being a landscape painter, and that's a beautiful landscape, but I don't see much individual personality in there. But after some practice, no one had painted like that before. It was deliberately not perfect, but it gave you the feeling, the impression. And then look at that. A little under 10 years after that, look at that. No one, that's to me incredibly beautiful and it's Monet. There's him coming out on that. And that's what happens when you practice. And then here's, something like 10, 15 years later, his, the footbridge in, over the water lilies. But look at this later. That's that same footbridge. And 1920, no one can't imagine anyone seeing that before he did it. And that's what happens when you do the reps. So I've been doing this for a while, and I'm maybe somewhere along, I've been doing it over 10 years, so I'm maybe somewhere around here in my practice, and I can bring you here in 7 weeks instead of 7 years. And I can't wait. I know people will pass me by like I'm standing still, and they'll achieve things like this because some people have more leadership skills than I do. And, they're brought up with them. Speaking of leadership, Dwight Eisenhower, who helped defeat Hitler, was president of the United States. He said, by leadership, we mean the art of getting someone else to do something that you want done because he wants to do it. That means his own intrinsic motivation. Not because your position or power can compel him to do it, or your position of authority. Is one of my big role models for leadership it's getting the other person to do your thing for their reason, which means you have to listen to them. People often don't share what their reasons are. You have to listen to find out what they are. And that's what the Spodek method teaches. You don't lead people by hitting over the head. This is Eisenhower again. That's assault, not leadership. We do not teach coercion, convincing, cajoling, manipulation. It's the opposite of that. It's not exercising authority. It's inspiring. Nelson Mandela, an effective leader. I don't know if you know that when he was in prison, he started learning Afrikaans. And people said, why are you learning the language of the oppressor? Aren't they the bad guys? And he said, because when you speak a language, English, well, many people understand you, including Afrikaners. But when you speak Afrikaans to Afrikaans, the oppressors, you go straight to their hearts by speaking their language. Precisely, this is continuing Nelson Mandela speaking, precisely because Afrikaans is the language of the oppressor, we should encourage our people to learn it. It's literature and history, and to watch new trends among Afrikaner writers. To know the strength and weakness of your opponent is one of the elementary rules. And that's why we learn, I don't want to say climate denialists. We learn people who are not living sustainably. Why aren't they living sustainably? We want to learn that. So there's a lot of not attacking, but empathizing and understanding. That's how you can lead someone. Teddy Roosevelt. I learned this from Teddy Roosevelt. It turns out he was quoting someone else who said it. Do what you can with what you've got where you are. Are we going to solve everything overnight? Nope. Do we have all the resources? Do we have the resources we wish? Nope. But we can do what we can with what we've got where we are and not just wait for others. And W.H. Murray, you might not know the name, but this quote is one of the great quotes for me. Until one is committed, there's hesitancy, the chance to draw back. Certainly for me, for 40 years I didn't act, but then I acted. And what happens when you act? Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there's one elementary truth that ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. And that's why we get people to act, not just study and lecture, but to act yourself. Because when providence moves, all sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no man could have dreamed would have come his way. So once you start acting, allies start showing up all over the place and things start working out that you never could have imagined when you were just sitting there studying and lecturing and not actually acting. So Murray continues, whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it, and we act boldly. Harriet Tubman. If you she helped many people after she escaped slavery. She went back into slave territory. And one of the things she said, if you hear the dogs, keep going. If you see the torches in the woods, keep going. If they're shouting after you, keep going. Don't ever stop. Keep going. If you want a taste of freedom, keep going. I read her stuff, and it turns out that there were times when people passed within feet of her, people with the dogs chasing, trying to find her to bring her to slavery. And she wrote about when she crossed the line the first time to enter free territory. She said, when I found I'd crossed that line, I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person. There was such a glory over everything. The sun came like gold through the trees and over the fields, and I felt like I was in heaven, and that's what we're going to bring you. When you learn that you don't have to hurt people just to live. So what to do here and now? Step 1, read Sustainability Simplified. See how our culture became stuck, how to get out from being stuck, the possible brighter future, and how to make all that happen. Next, take the workshop. Start your mindset shift and get on your path of continual improvement. And 3, join the community so that you're swimming downstream, not up, so that you feel like there's lots of things in life that are joyful and sustainable. And we bring the world with us in this community with joy and gratitude, not coercion, not manipulation. Again, the book gives you the big picture and the bright future. The big picture of sustainability and what's going on, how we got this way, and the history. And so that it's not just you practicing. You can play in an orchestra. You can play in a grand performance, as grand as you want. It's possible. Plus, it gives you the sheet music so you know what to do. Other books on sustainability, they just describe problems. But it's not from people who have hands-on practical experience. And that's what we need. So get the hands-on practical experience by doing the workshop. And you practice the basics. That's where you get the freedom. That's where you get the joy. And then eventually join the community, the alumni community, so that you're swimming downstream and that you see the long-term global change and you're making it happen. And again, that hands-on practical experience, that's where the hope comes from. Now, normally when there's a video saying you should take this course or read this book, then they'll say things like limited time only, buy now, all sorts of stuff, guarantees and the usual sales techniques to get you to buy. But that's not what we're doing here, because I know that whether you do it, I think you'll do it now to sign up to the workshop and get the book so you can read the book. But even if you don't, the headlines aren't going to go away. In fact, they're going to keep increasing. The storms are going to get worse. The droughts are going to get worse. The sea levels are going to keep rising. And more people around you will be filled with anxiety, depression, and addiction and so forth. And probably you will be too, because that's what happens when you know they're hurting people and you don't want to. And all of those things are going to keep telling you, wait a minute, there's a thing that works, that's joyful, that's rewarding, that brings gratitude. And I'm not saying this is quick or easy. You got to do the reps. You can't just start playing the piano and you're great. You got to practice. But it's meaningful, it's rewarding, and it's effective. It's effective in changing your life, and it's effective in enabling you to change culture. That's why people say, this is what I've been looking for my entire life. And before you do those, you can keep watching the videos. Next is the business and entrepreneurial opportunities. So there's a lot you can do. Just one workshop, that's wonderful, but there's a lot more that you can bring this to others. And I talk about the opportunities ahead. It's not the only place you can lead. There's politics, so you can change the world that way. And there's celebrity opportunities, because we want role models, people who are acting effectively, genuinely, authentically, allowing their vulnerabilities. They don't have to be perfect. And then our brighter future. The RE is lapped off. But that's what's next.